Hey everybody, welcome to Huntsville Biz Talk, brought to you by Nectar Bridge. We talk with business owners, leaders, subject matter experts about the ideas, challenges, and opportunities shaping business in Huntsville and beyond. Nectar Bridge provides back office support, including accounting, operations, and software solutions that help small business owners stay focused on their vision rather than getting stuck in the weeds. So my guests today are Rebecca Walker-Jones and Jason Fish, who are with Old Inc., which is a business brokerage. Jason, why don't you introduce yourself first, and then we'll go to Rebecca for her intro and the first question.
Hi, Gary, and thanks for having us on. My name is Jason Fish, and I work with Rebecca at Old Inc. Business Brokers, where we help business owners sell their business. That's who we run.
And Rebecca?
Hello, Gary. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Yes, my name is Rebecca Walker-Jones. I'm the founder and owner of Old Inc. Business Brokers, and we help small business owners sell their business for the right price to the right buyer in the shortest possible time frame.
Okay. And Rebecca, what is your background and how did you get into business brokerage?
I think I'm probably the most unlikely business broker that walks the planet because I started out life as a musician, as a singer-songwriter. I actually was signed to Sony BMG as a songwriter, about 31 years ago now. But the reason is that I grew up in family business. My mother actually started a business in the 1960s in London at a time where women weren't even allowed to be on a mortgage or on a bank account, let alone own a business. But my mother started a blue-collar agency, employment agency for transport personnel, forklift drivers, that type of thing. And I grew up in the family business. By the time I was 18, I was actually running 11 offices for the family. And so I rebelled and became a musician because I wanted absolutely nothing to do with family business at all. Went off to live in France and then ended up in Nashville as a musician. But once I got married and had a family, I basically started selling real estate, and it was my broker, actually. I was with Coldwell Banker for about 12 years. One day he said to me, Rebecca, how do you know how to read a balance sheet? And I said, what do you mean? Everyone knows how to read a balance sheet. He said, no, they don't. And he was the one that suggested I get into business brokerage. And honestly, the moment I did, it was like I'd found my home from home. I loved it, really passionate about small business.
Okay. I knew that accent. I was trying to place your accent. It's Nashville, right?
Yeah, Nashville buyer, sorry. Okay.
Jason, tell us about your background before you got into business, because I know you came in from the military, correct? Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely, Gary. Thank you. Yes, 4 years ago now, I retired from the Army after 21 years and 14 days. Family moved here to Huntsville. Just start new, just completely start over from scratch. And as I've been here, I've gotten to the business space, no pun intended actually. And Rebecca and I met 18 months or so ago throughout networking circles, and we've stayed in touch. And because I was running a business where we assist business owners with certain cost reduction strategies, that gave me a little bit of, what do they call it, street cred with Rebecca, and she got to see me pitch, perform, I guess you could say, in some at different events. And she reached out to me last fall and asked me if I'd be interested, and of course I said absolutely, and here we are. And but the nice crossover is Rebecca is helping small businesses. I was helping small businesses with what I was doing previously, and the passion to help business owners is our alignment, and with what Rebecca and Old Inc. offers is right in line with how I like to help people. I like helping people save their money, not to get taken advantage of, and do things a smooth and proper way.
Okay.
So, I hope that answers the question.
Rebecca, what kind of businesses does Old typically work with?
Yeah, good question, Gary. There are lots of mergers and acquisition firms that are after the $5 million, $10 million, $50 million businesses sell. That is not our space in which we operate. We honestly deal with very small businesses. So I'm talking about the smallest I think I've sold was for $75,000, and the largest I've sold was actually for $6 million, but that did include some real estate. Our sweet spot is probably $250,000 up to about $3 million.
Okay. Makes sense. And yeah, I won't get into the details, but I grew up in a family business myself, and we looked at selling that business a long time ago, and I think we definitely got connected with a business broker who was much more interested in businesses 10 times our size, and basically took a fee and put us on a listing, and that was the last we heard of them.
And Gary, that is exactly what happens. A lot of these listing brokerages will list hundreds and hundreds of businesses, but the national statistic is that they'll sell 20 to 25% of them, whereas we as a company, each broker maybe takes on 10 to 12 listings. The difference is, though, we're selling 80 to 95% of our listings.
Oh, wow.
There's always one or two that won't sell for various reasons, but for the most part, we've got an amazing track record because we're very picky about our listings,
right,
and we don't get overwhelmed by taking on hundreds.
Okay. And what kind of things do you do to market the business once they've signed with you?
So the very first thing we do is we have to prepare the business for sale. That normally takes us 3 to 4 weeks. We put together a very comprehensive package that will include history of the business, growth opportunities, the historical financials. We have valuation software that will have done a proper valuation. It also gives us a 5-year projection so that the buyer can see what kind of numbers they can do once they purchase the business. The goal with this package is to answer every single question that a buyer might have before we introduce them to our seller. So that's pretty much the bulk of what we do. And then in terms of marketing it, we are affiliated with about 5, possibly 6 or 7 third-party business brokerage websites. We will upload the listing, but it will be very confidential. It might just say manufacturing company in North Alabama,
right,
doing this amount of gross revenue, this amount of cash flow, genuine retirement sale, but it will never name the company. We take our clients' confidentiality very seriously. And honestly, once we put it on the market, and I'll give you an example, I just sold a small manufacturing company here in Huntsville. I put it on the market at 3:30 on Friday afternoon, and by 9 a.m. Saturday morning, I had 57 buyer inquiries.
Wow, that's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, it's sold now.
That's great. Talking about confidentiality, I recently saw a business which had listed itself on Facebook Marketplace. Buy from the business, we want to sell the business, and that's, first of all, not the best way to attract a buyer, and secondly, you've just told the entire public that you're making a radical shift, so that's
well, and
great.
The problem with that, Gary, is that the employees get nervous.
Yes.
They go off and find other jobs.
Right.
Suppliers can get nervous and actually change terms, maybe
right,
from net 60 to net 30. Now the seller's got a cash flow issue. And yes, customers might think, oh, I don't think I'm going to go there because Bill is leaving, and what if I don't get my deposit back or
yes,
whatever. So,
what kind of information should a seller put together when they are considering selling a business? You talked about
Jason,
the book earlier, so...
You want to take that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, if they're considering selling a business and we're going to help them, we really just need to get a most probable selling price to generate that type of report. We would just need 3 years of tax returns, most recent 3, current profit and loss, so we can do again, it's called a most probable selling price valuation. That particular valuation is a pretty good target of what you could be looking at, but it helps the owner see what they can't see because they're usually too close to the business. They're too emotionally involved, and we just give them black and white and talk through it with them and help build a strategy to help sell their business.
Talking about valuation, and you talked about how people are sometimes emotional. That frequently what I hear when I am around people who are thinking about selling or otherwise liquidating a business is the amount of money I would need to get out of it. And of course, people say the same thing about their pickup trucks too. It's, I owe this much, so I have to get this much out of it. And trying to get people to see it from a marketplace perspective is sometimes difficult, isn't it?
Very difficult, and it really is about perceived risk from the buyer's perspective.
Right.
A really good typical rule of thumb is, can the buyer get their money back within 2 to 3 years? Mm-hmm. So if you're making $100,000 as a seller, then you probably going to price the business between $200,000 and $300,000. If you're making $500,000 a year as a seller, then yes, maybe we can look at $1 million to $1.5 million. But a buyer is going to want to get their money back within 3 years.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about the way owners look at profits in their business sometimes? Because profits for a business, when a owner is really super active in their own business, working 40, 50 hours a week in their own business, can sometimes be a bit of a distorted picture. So wanted to talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, and I can give you an example of that. Currently, I've got an automotive business for sale. I did the valuation at $900,000. They're doing about $425,000 in cash flow, which is great. Mm-hmm. But I valued the most probable selling price at $900,000, but we've got it on the market at 1.2. The problem is it's caught between kind of a rock and a hard place in that the private equity groups, the industry buyers, are very interested in that $425,000 cash flow, but they don't want to do the job.
Right.
It needs an operations manager. So if my sellers hire or promote the operations manager, let's say they pay him $120,000 a year, now our cash flow has gone down to $300,000. The business is no longer as valuable. The profits aren't as high. Now the private equity groups aren't quite as interested, right? That's buyer number one. Buyer number two is somebody who is passionate about the automotive industry. They don't mind doing the work.
Right. And
they want to buy themselves a job. They're happy to do that. Perfect. Right. But here's the problem. Those buyers have typically only got about $100,000, maybe $200,000 to put down. But at a $1.2 million purchase price, they're taking on $1 million worth of debt at a very high interest rate, plus all the fees that the SBA charge, plus the fact that the SBA is going to want them to get some working capital. Yeah. If I'm in my 50s and I'm thinking of buying a company, I'm not going to take on $1 million worth of debt, so very risky. But right now, I literally just have to write an email to my sellers and say, you're caught between a rock and a hard place here. We have to lower the purchase price to make it attractive, not only to the private equity groups, because they're going to have to hire somebody and back out $125,000 from the cash flow, or to the person who's going to perceive the risk as far less risky if the purchase price is lower. Because borrowing $750,000 or $800,000 is a lot less scary than borrowing over $1 million. Does that help answer it?
It does, and yeah, and of course the size of the debt is, of course, or the amount of equity they have to put into it, I should say, is a big difference when you're looking at a private equity firm versus an individual who wants to own and run a business. I know in conversations I've had with you, Jason, and Rebecca at different times, we talked about things that I'll just call them future would-be sellers can do maybe even 3 to 5 years out to be in a better position. In other words, if you could advise this automotive shop 3 to 5 years ago to do something different, what would that look like?
The first thing would be to promote their replacement. There's 2 of them right now.
Yeah.
And they do have a shop manager. They need to make him the general manager, and he needs to have had 2 or 3 years worth of experience in order for them to start stepping away. That would be the first. Well, I've just written to them and said, you have to do this or you have to lower the price.
Okay.
In terms of other things that sellers can do, obviously reducing overheads is huge. Making sure that you have a lease in place if you don't own the premises is really important. A lot of people say, oh, I've had a lease for the last 35 years. We haven't actually got an official one now. It's just a handshake. It's month to month. And then what happens is I'll find a buyer and we'll approach the landlord and he'll say, oh, no, he said, I'm selling the building. Or I've actually found another tenant that's going to pay twice. So it's really important to have a secure lease, would be the other thing that I would say. And then the third thing is to make sure that the seller pays himself a dedicated W-2 salary.
Yes.
It makes buyers very nervous when a seller is just taking dividends throughout the year.
And that was one thing I wanted to hit on is if the seller has a defined or the owner at this point has a defined compensation, the profit picture is really clean. The W-2 income is coming out of the profit, so it's not a question of, oh, we made this much, but if I weren't working here, we'd be making less.
And we always add the salary back to the bottom line,
Right.
but it proves to the buyer that this business can consistently support a monthly income.
Sure. Yeah, that's right. My own just thing I'll add to that part of the discussion is just the importance of clean books, the quality of the bookkeeping. Of course, that's something I'm on a mission about, is a lot of people check in with a CPA once a year so they can get their taxes filed, but 11 months out of the year they don't really know where they are, which is not a good way to run a business and certainly makes things more complicated when you're trying to sell it. So have you seen experiences with that?
Yes, a lot of sellers will do their annual taxes, but they don't have monthly P&Ls. And if you sell a business that ends up becoming funded by SBA, the SBA is going to insist on monthly financials. It normally takes 60 to 90 days to close a deal. Okay. And the SBA is going to want to see every quarter, how is the business performing. If the seller's never done monthly financials and now has to suddenly get the CPA to do it, there's lag time. Right. The buyer isn't going to sit and wait forever. And right. So if I'm waiting for financials that never arrive, the buyer gets bored and wanders off. So yes. Having monthly financials that are consistently given out by the CPA is really important. I'm trying to think what else would be really important. Just having correct financials. Yes. Sometimes the seller will give me their profit and loss, and I'll say, is this exactly what you're going to give to your accountant to file? And they'll say, yes, it's exactly right. And so I'll do the valuation on the profit and loss, and then a month later, 2 months later, when the tax return gets filed and the deal is dependent on that tax return comes in, it bears no resemblance whatsoever to the profit and loss. Now it looks like I've misrepresented the company. Really important to have accurate financials.
And if I can add, a very broad statement would be for that owner to always ask themselves every day, in a forward-looking sense, if I have to sell my business today, is it ready to go? And that means basically are all the administrative requirements that can be a lot, and we've already spoke to a lot of them already. But I think that's the mindset an owner needs to have, because 5-10 years is going to pass quickly, and they're going to want to sell at that point. And they want to be as ready as they can be. So if you do little things every single day, little increments, the compounding effect will pay off.
Absolutely. I think that people often just fail to look at their business, crazy as it sounds. They're not really looking at it as an asset. They're primarily looking at it as their job or the family tradition or that sort of thing. So when they look at it that way, the financials become secondary, and they just look at cash flow, and if we got cash flow, we're making it, and they don't really look at the bigger picture. I'll add about, when you're talking, Rebecca, about the sort of the reconstruction of the P&Ls or how the tax return ends up looking different than where they thought they were. We've managed a couple of situations where we've basically reconstructed some P&Ls from bank statements, and the level of accuracy you can get with that, you can basically get the income and expenses down, but the level of detail is just never as good as if you were just doing it as you go.
Exactly.
So consistency, and besides which, you have to reconstruct it for these purposes, like the loans or the statements and so forth, but that's all that information that you didn't have at the time when you could have used it to see things like sales are actually down, or expenses are up, or various other problems that might crop up.
And also having correct line items.
Yes.
So for instance, let's say I'm looking at a company's insurance and it went up from 18,000 maybe to 19,000 the following year, and then suddenly it's at 72,000. And I'll say, why did your insurance go up that high? Most sellers go, I don't know. And so, it becomes difficult then. I've got to try and explain to a buyer, where is this money and what was it? And if they haven't done monthly P&Ls or the monthly entering of it, and they can't find it out, it may have been an add back. It's something that was an unnecessary business expense that I could add back to the bottom line.
Right.
But unless I know what it is, I can't use it.
Yep. Absolutely. I Good.
So yeah, I think a good rhythm for any business owner, and I get it's going to vary off the size of the business, but maybe every 2 weeks on a Thursday afternoon or a Friday morning, you're sitting down with your team and you're going through your finances, right? And maybe that's just a quick look, and then once a month is the deep dive. I think if you can maintain that rhythm, you're going to be in good shape.
Totally agree.
Absolutely.
And I think kind of the concrete tasks that keep you on that point is, if you're using accounting software like QuickBooks, looking at your bank feed and matching or categorizing everything that's coming in to all of your accounts and reconciling statements is what keeps at least most of that straight, if not all of it. We've touched. Go ahead.
I was going to say something else you mentioned earlier about how sellers are really just looking at their profits and saying, are we making money? One of the biggest mistakes I see, especially in retiring sellers, is that they wait until the trajectory is starting to plummet to call us. And I'll look at their accounts and I'll say, my goodness, you made terrific revenues for the last 4 years. Now it's going down. Why didn't you call me last year? And they say, because I was making money. The best time to sell is exactly then, is when the business is making money. Too many people leave it to the last moment, and then I can't get them the value that they should get.
This is a good place to bring it into a last question that I had, and I feel like we've covered most of the ones that I could anticipate, but what are some tough questions that arise, like the ones we've described? Maybe what are some tough conversations you've had that aren't in the categories we've talked about when people are looking at selling their business?
I think transparency from sellers is absolutely key. So as long as sellers tell me, let's say, I don't know, it's a week before closing and the general manager walks out, I need to know.
Yeah.
Let's say you lose a big client. I need to know. I can pretty much turn anything into a growth opportunity for the buyer. Where I always fall into trouble is where the seller has slid something under the carpet and hope that it's not going to be noticed.
Yeah.
Because if the buyer finds that out, even if there is a solution to the problem, it destroys the trust. And if the buyer doesn't trust the seller, the buyer walks. I look for.
Okay. My last question I always ask, is there any other question you wish I'd asked you?
Let's see. Yeah, okay. A lot of people, when they find out that we charge 10%, they go, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money. How on earth am I going to give somebody 10% of my business?
Yeah.
What they don't realize is that most businesses will take 6 to 12 months to sell, and the easy part is finding the buyer.
Right.
Buyers are there, all right? I can put a business on the market and have 60 buyers within a week. The hard part is getting to the closing table, because there are so many obstacles that arise during due diligence, having to find the funding, having to get the leases signed, lots of different things that come out of the woodwork. And what most people don't realize is that 90% of those deals would fall apart if it wasn't for the business broker coming up with creative solutions to get those problems resolved.
Right.
And honestly, I feel like we earn every penny. So.
Oh, yeah, and it's analogous to real estate, which I didn't realize until I talked to Jason the other day, that you have a real estate license, which is needed sometimes in managing these sales, but it's very much just like any real estate transaction you've ever heard of. Marketing it has its own set of challenges. Getting an interested buyer to the table is one thing, but as you say, all these things that can come up along the way and make it there's a lot of moving parts, I guess, would be
a lot of moving parts,
quickest and easiest way to say that. And most business owners are just not prepared to handle all those situations.
A lot of people have never sold a business before,
well,
whereas we've sold hundreds and hundreds of businesses,
right.
So we have the experience.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time, and that brings this episode to a conclusion. We appreciate y'all being here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.